and Darren Dunning, and one of the successful nurses from the first call, which supported nurses and midwives. That's Katie Gallagher. So thanks so much for joining us. We're also joined by Elizabeth, who's a senior program manager in the team, and she leads on the underrepresented specialisms and disciplines calls. And Catherine, who's also a program manager with RfPB, and she'll help manage some questions at the end. So next slide, please. So just a bit of housekeeping to start. So all cameras and microphones, apart from those of the panelists, will be muted just to avoid background noise and interference. And as you might have just heard, the webinar is being recorded today, and we'll make this available later. Just please note it might take a few days before we can share it, and we will also share the slides afterwards as well. There will be a Q&A button available towards the end of our presentations. So please don't worry, it's not there now. We have already received quite a few questions, so hopefully we'll be able to answer some of those as we go along. And then please do make use of the Q&A button when this becomes available. And also make use of the like feature for questions you find relevant, and we'll try to prioritise those ones that have the most interest. We might not have time to answer all of the questions here, but we will take a note of everything, and then we can update our FAQs online. And if you do have any specific questions, then we can get back to you by email as well. So the next slide, please. So an overview of the webinar today. So we'll first have an overview of the RfPB programme, as well as this specific funding opportunity supporting nurses and midwives. Then Gareth and Darren from the NHR Research Support Service will talk about their service and how they can support applicants. And then we'll then hear from Katie Gallagher, who will talk about her experience of applying to the first call and also setting up her study. And then at the end, we'll have around 15 minutes for questions. Next slide, please. So firstly, we'll just cover the scope of the RfPB programme, funding limits, and then our programme director, Kevin, will provide some background around the funding opportunities supporting the underrepresented disciplines and specialisms, and also go over some of the eligibility criteria for the newly launched call. I'll then give an overview of the application process and some timelines, and go over some of those answers to some of the most common questions that we've received. So the next slide, please. So yeah, I'd like to start by introducing the RfPB programme. We do really want to highlight that every funding opportunity for the programme is open to applications led by health and care professionals, including nurses and midwives. And the RfPB programme funds research projects on a wide range of areas of health services and social care. Our programme is response mode and researcher led, so it's up to you to tell us what you think is a good research question and why it's important. We fund both qualitative and quantitative research with a clear trajectory to patient and UNICEF benefit. And this should be clearly outlined in the application. Even if the trajectory is a bit longer, it's really important to describe what the next steps are and how the study would eventually lead to patient benefit. So to date, the programme has funded over 1,500 projects at a total value of £330 million. And for the regular funding opportunities, we operate 8 funding committees, and we have a regional lens in addition to the nationwide consideration. We run 3 funding opportunities per year, and the next one closes on the 4th of March 2026. We have a 2-stage application process, and so all applicants will receive feedback on the outline application, and then if invited to submit a full application, this feedback will then need to be addressed in the full application form. Next slide, please. So in terms of scope of the RfPB programme, this is very broad. The key thing we want to see is that there is a clear trajectory to patient benefit. So to give a few examples, this could include studies that evaluate the effectiveness and cost effectiveness of interventions. It could be feasibility studies, so that is studies exploring the feasibility of conducting a full definitive trial, and also intervention development or refinement. To clarify what the RfPB programme doesn't fund, just to pick out a few examples here. So we don't fund lab-based or basic research. We don't fund infrastructure, such as the setting up or maintaining of research units. And we won't fund, for example, applications that are solely service developments without a wider research question. And you can find more information about this on our website too. Next slide, please. So the RfPB programme has a tiered funding system to balance the likelihood of a proposal achieving patient benefit against its cost. And as this call is part of the RfPB programme, the standard eligibility rules apply. So, for example, the broad remit and the host should be an NHS body or other provider of NHS services in England. We categorise the research into three separate tiers. So the maximum that we award is £500,000 for up to 36 months in duration. This is what we class a tier one award. That would include proposals with a clear and close trajectory to patient benefit, such as a randomized controlled trial or diagnostic accuracy study. And we would expect to see the results from tier one studies to be used directly to inform clinical practice. Tier two awards are up to £300,000. These are usually feasibility or preparatory studies. And so these would typically require a follow-on study before they would achieve patient benefit. And then the tier three funding envelope is up to £200,000. And this includes more high-risk proposals with a longer trajectory to patient benefit. There is quite a broad range of projects in this group. So on the next slide, we have a few examples. So I won't go through all of these now, but for example, it includes observational studies using database data, development or refinement of interventions, exploratory studies, secondary data analyses, systematic reviews. And so the majority of the projects that we fund are tier three studies, and these could be a really good place to start for early career researchers needing their first grant. I think at this stage, I'll hand over to our Programme Director, Professor Kevin Munro, to talk a little bit more about this specific call.
Thank you, Louisa. I mean, thanks for standing in at short notice because of Elizabeth having a health problem. Thanks to all the team for putting the webinar together today. And great to see so many people here. And others, of course, are going to benefit from the recording. I'm only able to stay with you for about 20 minutes or so. So thanks for accommodating, but it's great to be here. There was a time when I was an early career researcher, and two of my first grants were from RfPB. So I highly recommend it. I think of all the NHR funding routes, this is the one where you stand the biggest chance as an early career researcher at getting a foot on the ladder. You know, I was a fairly experienced clinician before I kind of dabbled my toes into research. So let's just move on, please. Okay, so the wheel has completely turned. We've had a whole series of these calls for underrepresented disciplines, and we put nurses and midwives at the top of the stack. And now we've gone all the way around and we're back to nurses and midwives again. Of course, all the underrepresented disciplines can apply to all of our calls anytime, but we've just found with experience that that hasn't been happening. And that's why the Department of Health and Social Care have been so keen that we raise the profile and they give us a separate pot of money to try and attract people like you, nurses and midwives, to apply for some research funding, because they see the importance of embedding research, applied research, into the everyday workforce. So about 2 years ago, maybe it was slightly longer, when we started the process, we began with nurses and midwives, and we had £3 million, and we funded, I think it was 16, it's on the slide, 16 projects then. And here are a couple of quotes from people who were funded from that round. So we have Louise there, who was working with patients who were coming out of critical illness. And then we've got Emma there, who was looking at cancer and people with HIV. And later on this webinar, you're going to hear from Katie Gallagher, who also received funding, and she'll tell you a bit about her experience. Next slide, please. Okay, so just some of the points, and we've learned some things along the way. So although we put nurses and midwives to the top of the pile when we started, we learned and we made some modifications along the way, and here's one of them. So as an applicant, you have to be an early career researcher, and we have a definition for that. The definition would be someone who has not been the lead applicant on a research award of £100,000 or more. You may have received an award to do a PhD, for example, a personal award. We don't take that into account. So if you've never held an award of £100,000 or more as the lead applicant, then this is an opportunity for you. Because we classify you as an early career researcher, then we expect you to have a co-applicant, someone who's highly experienced at doing research, and they're really there to mentor you so that maybe after this application, you're able to become a sole lead applicant because of the experience. And the first time around, here's an example of one of the changes we made. First time around, the co-applicant, your mentor, had to be someone from the same background as you, nurses and midwives. And then we realized actually, that's a bit silly because there are lots of good, able people that are able to do research and mentor you. So we've broadened it. So this time around, you can have a co-lead who doesn't come from a nurses and midwives background. You can if you want to, but it doesn't have to be. And what the committee does when they're assessing your application is they look at the team as a whole. So they want to know what your background is, that your mentor has the right skills to help you, and that there are other people on the team who are going to help ensure the project's going to be successful. So applications will have, well, the number of applicants will vary, but it wouldn't be unusual that an application would have 6, 7, 8 applicants on it. Next slide, please. So, what are some of the important considerations? So Louisa already mentioned these. The pot of money that's available to any one application is up to £500,000. And this has to be for work that's completed within 3 years. So Louisa mentioned we have our tiered funding levels, and there's tier one, tier two, and tier three. And tier one is like the top division. That's where you can apply for up to £500,000. But that's usually for a sort of definitive trial that at the end of it, we have the answer that can be implemented into clinical practice. And then we have lower funding limits for tier two and tier three. All of the work that comes to research for patient benefit has to have a clear trajectory to patient benefit. That's one of the key things that we look at and measure the application against. And if it's a tier one, we'd expect that to be relatively close to patient benefit so that when the study is complete within a small number of years, the results can change practice, because we're all about putting research into practice. If it's a smaller pot of money, tier three, for example, then we accept that that's some preliminary work, and there might be a bit of time before that work ever gets to patient benefit. So you have to make sure that your topic and the design fit within the RfPB remit. In terms of who can host it, it can be really anyone who provides NHS services. So it might be like an NHS trust, for example, but it could be a local authority. Doesn't really matter, as long as they provide NHS services, then they act as the contracting organisation. They're the person that we send the money to, and they're also ultimately responsible for the delivery of the research. So they're acting as the sponsor of the research. And I think that's probably the only 3 slides that I was going to speak to today. But I just wanted to tell you something that I was doing earlier today that I think is directly relevant to you. And that was, I was looking at what the top tips would be to someone who's applying for an RfPB award for the first time. So earlier this year, we have an annual meeting, and all the chairs from our 8 different regions come together, and the program managers that support them. And we said, what would be your one top tip that you would give to applicants who are applying for the first time? And we haven't really shared this more widely yet. So I was looking at it this morning, and I'm just going to take a minute just to tell you some of these tips, which hopefully will help you. So the first one was a tip, and it came from me. And my top tip was, but we've got this covered already in this call, was that you should work with someone who already has grant success, especially with RfPB. And that's because you will benefit from their experience and their wisdom. They will have made lots of mistakes, and hopefully you will benefit from it. But that's why we have a co-applicant, a co-lead, I should say, this time around. Next top tip. So this came from one of the senior research officers, and they said, you need to read the guidance, you need to register your application online as soon as you can, and make sure you contact us well in advance of the deadline if you have any problems. And that's because for RfPB, there's a high volume of queries come in, a high volume of applications. And if you're going to wait to the last minute, then you might find it's very hard to get a response from the team. Next top tip. So this came from one of the program managers who helps look after one of our regional committees. And he said, there are people on the call who are going to enjoy this, Gareth, and Dan said, you got to work with the research support service. And that's because the research support service completely understands what RfPB is about. They often come and they observe in our committees, and they know what's expected, and they've got all the expertise. And actually, what I can tell you is, I think now with experience, we can see a good application and we know that they've had input from research support service. And then a weaker one, we know that either they didn't get support or they didn't listen to the advice that they were given. So that's third on our top list. Number 4 is to make sure your plain English summary is good and clear. And that's because, and that also came from one of our regional program managers, it's because most committee members will start by looking at the plain English summary. So that really sets the tone for your whole proposal. Number 5 on the list for another program manager is you got to clearly explain the trajectory to patient benefit. So it's not just we're going to answer this research question, it's how is it going to get into clinical practice? One of our regional chairs said, clearly spell out the problem for a non-specialist, spell that out in the lay summary and in the main body of the application and how the research is going to address this problem. And that's because the committee, and each panel will have about 20 people on it, and there'll be almost no one who will have expertise in your area. Actually, that's not strictly correct for this one because we invite lots of nurses and midwives to come and be on the committee. But even if they're a nurse and midwife, they might have no particular expertise in your area. So you've got to make sure the message is very easy for everyone to read and understand. I'm only going to give you the top 10 tips because we won't have enough time. But let me tell you about number 7. This was one of our program managers, one of our senior program managers, and he said, you need to really think about what you put into the outline application because it's a 2-stage process. In the outline stage, we used to call this stage 1, you only have 5 pages. And he said, you need to be careful how much space you use for different topics. So for example, how much space are you going to allocate to what the rationale for the project is, how much space you're going to put aside for the research questions and the aims and objectives. And that's important because you want to get through to a full stage application, and we usually lose about half of our applications at the outline stage. So the top tip there is try and get it right so you catch people's eye and they want to invite you to come back for a full application. Number 8 on the list, this came from one of our regional chairs who said, don't overcomplicate things and don't be overly ambitious. And often when we're not familiar with doing research, we start with this great idea on how we're going to change the world. And actually, it's often like a smaller incremental change. But sometimes a small amount of money can have a big impact in the long run. So be realistic about with your ambition. Number 9 on the list, also from one of the regional chairs, was start and finish the proposal with a focus on the ultimate end game. So what they mean by that is not just what your research is, but how is your work going to change practice and how are you going to make sure it changes practice? It's one thing saying I'm going to disseminate and I'm going to talk at conferences and put it in academic journals. That doesn't change practice. People also say I'm going to get it into a clinical guideline, and that's a good start, but not everyone follows clinical guideline. So really thinking through from the very beginning to the end, if this is successful, if it's a tier 1, or if it's a tier 3 or a tier 2, thinking through what all the stages will be. So you're absolutely clear on this is where we need to get to. And the last one at number 10 that I'm going to share with you came from a regional chair, and they said, respond fully to the feedback you receive. So when your application is reviewed and it comes back, the letter will include some feedback from the assessors on the committee. And if they're inviting you back for a full application, then you want to make sure you're addressing all their feedback points and keeping them on board. So that chair said, the feedback summarises the aspects of your application that could make it unsuccessful. The committee needs to see that you have addressed this and either made changes or you've reassured them about some concerns that they had. So I'm going to get this information out to you. I'm sorry it's not on a slide, but I was just doing it immediately before this presentation. So I'm going to stop it at that stage. I'm glad so many of you have joined us today, and we really welcome as many applications from you as possible. And we do recognise that you're an early career researcher, and our aim is to support you along the way. And it's not our money, and we're not trying to hold on to it. We're trying to spread the money around and give it to as many people as possible. So good luck with your applications. Back to you, Louisa.
Thanks so much for that, Kevin. So now I'll just go through an overview of the application process and timelines. So this call launched a few weeks ago on the 19th of November, and the deadline for the expression of interest form is the 2nd of March 2026 at 5 p.m. The deadline for the outline application is the 8th of April at 1 p.m. And then following the call close, there will be a scrutiny and triage process, and then this will be followed by the outline application committee assessment. The applicants should find out the results from this in around July, August 2026. And then if you're invited to submit a full application, the deadline for this will be in October. The full applications will then be assessed by committees in November, and we expect that the applicants will find the outcome in January or February 2027. All applicants will receive feedback on the outline applications, and if invited to submit a full application, you'll receive feedback on this as well. Next slide, please. So we mentioned the applications need to be submitted via the awards management system, and the application form for this is already available for this call. So one of our top tips, Kevin's already mentioned this, so please start working on the form as early as possible. So this ensures that you're aware of all the information that's needed, and if you experience any issues, you'll have time to deal with them, and there's also time for us to provide support as well. Please do note that the submission of the expression of interest form is a requirement before submitting the outline application. So this needs to be submitted by the 2nd of March at 5 p.m. The expression of interest it's not expected to be a summary of the fully developed application, and it won't be part of the assessment, but we'll use it for administrative purposes only. So for initial eligibility checks, and it will also help us put together the funding committee to ensure that we've got the relevant expertise covered. This form is not via the awards management system, so this is a separate form which is linked in the funding opportunity on the website, and it's also linked here in the slides. So we'll share these afterwards, and you'll be able to find it there too. And so a special selection committee will be assembled for this highlight notice. So we'll draw on the expertise of current RfPB regional committee members and also other relevant experts to the call. Next slide, please. So we do have the Q&A session at the end of the webinar, but I'll just briefly go over some answers to some of the most common questions that we see, and then we'll shortly open the Q&A section. So some of the most common questions we receive are around who is an early career researcher and who can be considered a senior mentor. So just to reiterate some of what Kevin mentioned earlier, the lead applicant should be a nurse or midwife, and also an early career researcher supported by a senior mentor who should be the joint lead applicant. So we define an early career researcher as someone who has not yet been the lead on a research grant worth more than £100,000. So you might have held a fellowship or a studentship above this value, but this is not a research grant, so then you'd still be considered an early career researcher. And the mentor or joint lead applicant can have any relevant background, as Kevin previously mentioned, but they should have had at least one grant over £100,000 and led this to completion, and also have some experience mentoring early career researchers. Next slide, please. So here's some other common questions. So is this opportunity open to people who do not have a PhD or are coming to the end of their PhD? So the answer to this is yes, you don't need to have a PhD to apply for the call. The research project could be a part of a PhD, but the PhD fees won't be covered by an RfPB grant, which leads to the next question. So would this award cover university research course fees? And the answer to this one is no. So we don't fund any student or study fees. Can the application be based on a previous unsuccessful submission if it's revised in light of the feedback? So yes, this is absolutely fine. We would advise you to highlight how the previous feedback has been addressed within the current application. And then finally, can you be involved with 2 grants submitted within the same RfPB call? And the answer to this is also yes. So you can be involved in more than one application. You would need to demonstrate that you have time to do this and indicate the time committed to each grant if you are successful with more than one. If you do have any other questions after today, please just email us on that email address shown there. And next slide, please. So we've also included some useful resources. So here's a summary of some kind of links. And as I mentioned, the slides will be shared with you, so you can go back and have a look here. In particular, the call specification and the call-specific FAQs will be useful to put together an application for this call. And yeah, finally, that's all from me. So thank you very much, everyone. I'll hand over to Darren and Gareth now from the RSS, and we'll open the Q&A as well.
Thanks, Louisa, and hi everyone. I'm Gareth O'Brien. I am Operational Director of the Research Support Service Hub delivered by Imperial College and Partners, and I'll be joined by Darren today, who will introduce himself when I hand over to him in a couple of minutes. We're going to talk a little bit about generally the structure of RSS, what we look like, what our vision is, some of the support that we provide to applicants like yourselves, show some little statistics about what we've achieved in the last year or so, and then I'll hand over to Darren, who will give some more top tips from the perspective of the Research Support Service that sort of complements the talk that Kevin gave us earlier. He also did an excellent plug for us in terms of directing you to us and saying that applications will be strengthened. I agree with that, and I'm going to tell you why and how as I talk to it. So next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to kick off with how the RSS can help and talk about the structure. So next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a general overview of the Research Support Service. So we're a completely national service set up as part of NIHR's funded infrastructure. So you'll have heard of things like the Biomedical Research Centres or the Applied Research Collaborations, the BRCs and the ARCs. The RSS is another acronym in that space, and we're set up specifically to provide support and advice to researchers like yourselves from all backgrounds and organisations to help develop competitive applications for nationally peer-reviewed funding. And that's an important statement about our remit. RfPB fits very, very clearly within that. That's an open for anyone to apply to. It's nationally peer-reviewed. So that basically means that we support all applications across NIHR and other funders. We support big charities like the Wellcome Trust, British Heart Foundation. The key to it is that it's sort of open to anyone to apply to and is peer-reviewed. So, for example, we don't support hospital charity funds that might only be open to people employed by that institution, but we would support large charity grants led by particular professional backgrounds. So British Heart Foundation open to cardiologists, but from across the UK, and therefore that's within the RSS remit. This lovely diagram on the right-hand side of the slide shows how we're structured. It's delivered in partnership. So although this has got the name of 8 institutions on there, what you actually get when you have access to us is around a collaboration of sort of 30 different universities, clinical trial units, and a mixture of NHS trusts, local authorities, and community and voluntary organisations. As we're a national service, it sort of doesn't matter which of these hubs that you approach. We all offer a very similar core offer, which I'll talk about in a second, and we all work in partnership in the background to make sure that you're directed to the hub that can support you best. If, for example, you approached Imperial and you wanted support with something that we couldn't offer, particular specialty or particular methodology, we would work together with another hub that's able to provide that to you. And I really want to shout out the specialist centres that we have. So if you're looking at doing research into social care or into public health, we have specialist centres in public health provided by Newcastle and Southampton, and specialist centres in social care provided by York and Lancaster. And that's to recognise the different needs of these populations and areas and make sure that we've got support and advice that's structured around those particular needs for researchers from those backgrounds too. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is a relatively busy slide, but it signifies all of the amazing support that we provide as the Research Support Service and gives you insight into how to access us. We offer expertise right through the process, whether you're very early on in deciding on your research question or what funding stream you might want to apply to, right all the way through to some light touch post-award support and everything in between. So we offer particular insight into potentially how to build your research team, the sort of expertise that you might need in that research team to answer the research questions that you want to answer. We might be able to help you improve your writing technique and pitching your application to the funder. As Kevin and Louisa have already outlined, the way to pitch a stage 1 application, that outline stage, is very different to how you might pitch a stage 2, and it's important to make use of those initial 5 pages versus the full-length application later on. We're really, really well versed in understanding exactly what the funder's looking for at those 2 intervals and across different programs and different funders too. And so we can help you pitch your application to make sure that when it goes through to the funder, it's positively appraised. We've got expertise across all of our hubs in people and communities and involving people with lived experience, so public involvement. And we offer a particular thing called peer funding, which in short is the public involvement and engagement resource. And this offers a small sum of money to help you do some PPIE work before you submit. So you might need money to offer payment for things like focus groups or reimburse travel and things like that, and you can be quite creative in that space, and we've got money that can support you, help to make your design more inclusive and include the right sort of people and patients in it. We also really, really deeply understand research inclusion. This is a new condition of funding for NIHR, so it's just as important as getting the methods right in your project to show that your research is inclusive by its design. We consider ourselves at the cutting edge of that space. We're really working to understand NIHR and other funders' requirements to make sure that we can offer really relevant advice. We collate and respond to panel feedback about research inclusion, things around digital inclusivity, things around making sure that high prevalence disease areas or people from highly affected backgrounds are included in your research. And we have specific expertise in all of our hubs that help make research applications to different programs more inclusive. We can also help with methodological design, planning for implementation and demonstrating impact, as Kevin outlined earlier. How might your research best move along care for patients and the public? And as I said, we also offer an element of light touch post-award support. This might be some signposting, it might be some individual advice about how to move your project forward if you're a little bit stuck. And what we're really trying to do as the Research Support Service is break the game of research support and give it in the best possible way that we can. So we're trialling loads of innovative approaches. Some hubs offer expertise such as mock interviews. So if you were invited to interview for a particular program, we replicate the design process of that interview entirely. And speaking for our hub at Imperial, about 70% of the people who have mock interviews with us go on to be funded at the real interview, which is something that we're very proud of. A number of hubs offer also external peer review, so you can have your application peer reviewed by an expert who's got experience of the funding program that you're applying to, with a view to making it more competitive before you submit. And we also offer a multitude of training sessions across all the hubs, so you'll see offers such as to line up your fellowship application, so some work on developing that. And I'm going to outline a particular one that we've got for all people on this call, so all of you as early career researchers or mentors applying for the RfPB underrepresented disciplines call. As others have said, it's super important to contact us as early as possible, similarly to writing your application as early as possible. The longer you give us to help you, the longer we have to plan and implement all of these cool things that I've just spoke about in terms of supporting your research journey. And at the moment, Darren will give a bit more detail on this, but to access us, you can find us on the NIHR internet. If you Google NIHR Research Support Service, we'll be the first thing that comes up, and you can fill in an online form. You can pick or choose the hub based on expertise or specialty, or you can approach the RSS in general, and we'll triage you to the hub that can best support your needs. Next slide, please. Thank you. I just want to outline a bit of success that we've had and demonstrate what we're used to doing. This is what we achieved in 24-25. So across the UK, we supported 3,500 requests for support from researchers to a whole heap of different funding streams and programs across NIHR and wider, of which 1,400 were early career researchers, like most of yourselves might be on this call. That's a track record that we're extremely proud of. Again, I speak for my hub at Imperial and our partners elsewhere when I say that we're really, really well versed in supporting early career researchers. We've got a huge amount of experience. Our advisors are researchers themselves and have often been through the same sort of processes that you're looking to go through in terms of applying for competitive funding and looking to get grant money. And in 2024-25, we were part of applications that were awarded £190 million in total, which is, again, something that we're really proud of. And the thing that I'm most proud of on this slide is the bit of feedback that we've got in the bottom right corner. So I've spoke to you about this amazing structure that we have and all the expertise and work that we do in the background, but actually all of this is wrapped up in kindness and with structure as well. So we're really proud of what we do in this space. I encourage you to approach us as early as possible and engage with us. RfPB is one of the most supported funding calls that we do. We're very experienced in that area, so please do consider us. Next slide, please. I just want to very quickly signpost you to a session that we'll be running in a week from now, which is specifically targeted to this Research for Patient Benefit call, which is around implementation science. We understand how important it is to demonstrate that trajectory to public and patient benefit for the RfPB call, and we'll be hosting a session around implementation science in terms of just exploring the fundamentals, giving some examples of how to use it, and it'll be hosted by two of our experts, one of which is based at King's College London and another at the University of Cambridge. It will be a 30-minute discussion between those amazing researchers in their own right, and then 30 minutes of questions and answers. And you might also have to listen to me talk about RSS for another 5 minutes at the start of it. But I still encourage you to attend. You can scan the QR code on screen, or the link has been posted in the chat. It is specifically targeted at the Research for Patient Benefit programme. It will really dive deep into how you can make your research include implementation science to demonstrate that impact. So with that, thank you very much for listening. I'm going to hand you over to Darren, who's going to talk about some top tips for applying for the Research for Patient Benefit programme. Thanks very much.
Hello, everyone. My name's Darren Dunning. I'm the Assistant Director of the York & Partners RSS Hub, and I'd like to share some top tips on how to produce a competitive application. Next slide, please. The first part, Kevin's really talked about this a little bit, but when you're working with a mentor or your joint lead, you should discuss how you plan to work together during both the application process and when undertaking the research. It's good to have people that have lots of experience, but how often will they be able to attend meetings? How much will they be able to contribute? So try and get that arranged really before you start. For assembling a team, again, get people in place as soon as you can so they can contribute effectively to the development of the application. All the co-investigators are invested, their best interests the project is funded, so make sure that you're able to utilize their skills and experience. Think holistically about research methods, PPIE, and a clinical expertise. You will need people who will be able to cover all of these areas in your team, and be open and transparent about roles and expectations from the outset. I would suggest keep the team involved, get all the help you can. Don't try and do it yourself. It's more onerous if this is your first grant than you probably think it will be. So get all the help that you possibly can, and also remember that there's a limit. There's a budgetary limit, and it can be quite tight. People's time is expensive, so be careful when adding people to the grant if they won't be contributing enough. Next slide, please. And then when you're pitching your project, I would say avoid jargon and acronyms. I haven't met a person yet that likes acronyms, and this is something that is remarked upon often in funding panels. What it does is if you use lots of acronyms, it takes the person out of the sort of reading experience of your grant. So they're kind of trying to decode what you were saying. NHS is fine, but be careful when using too many. Do explain the problem that you're addressing clearly. Don't assume that the panel will already know what it is. I always say these things as a cross between a story and a sales pitch. The first part of the story is the extent of the clinical problem. So what is it? How many people does it affect? How does it affect them? How much does it cost to treat the NHS? Think of these questions in your head when you're trying to build a compelling narrative, and a clear set of hypotheses that are stated throughout. Keep reminding the reviewers why what you were doing is important. Be ambitious and realistic. This is finding that sweet spot between being feasible and overly ambitious. It's an art, but you will get all the help that you can to so you know that you're doing this So someone experienced, like your mentor, will probably know if you're overreaching. And so the RSS can help with that too. We see a lot of these grants. Yeah, but make sure that the aims and objectives are cohesive and clear. Next slide, please. Oh no, it isn't. It's this slide. It's this slide still, isn't it? Yeah. I always think try and make the path from the clinical problem to your solution as straight and as short as you can. Simple stories sell, I always think. So you've just got to explain why what you're doing is important and make it a nice, straightforward story if you can. And Kevin's already mentioned how important the lay summary is. This will be the thing that the panel will refer to. They will read all of the grant, but then they will refer back to the lay summary. Sorry, now it's the next slide. It's inclusive approach. So, of course, embed public and patient involvement throughout the application, rather than as an afterthought. We always say that there needs to be a thread of PPI that runs throughout the application, including before you submit it. Gareth has mentioned the peer fund. So if you want to do some work before you submit, you can apply to the peer fund through the RSS. Think about your stakeholders. These might be patients or the families of patients, NHS staff, whoever, but think carefully about who your stakeholders would be. And also think whether the research meets the needs of the whole population for which it is relevant. So don't be too niche and exclude relevant groups through your eligibility criteria. So the link there will give you some more guidance on this. So that's there as a resource. Next slide, please. So there are lots of different ways that you can design inclusive research. I won't go through all this because there's a lot, but it's here in the slides for your reference. Being inclusive doesn't just mean recruiting from diverse populations. It could be having a diverse research team, how your results are disseminated, eligibility criteria. One thing I would like to mention, though, because it's quite new, is the mandatory requirements for researchers to account for sex and gender in their research applications. So you've got to demonstrate how you've considered it throughout the whole research life cycle. This includes study design, sampling strategy, and analysis. And this is in addition to the other inclusive things that you've already got to do. Funding will not be awarded without a clear justification for how sex and gender have both been considered. And next slide, please. So this is basically a replication of what Gareth produced. This is if you want to seek support from the RSS, do it in a timely way. Soonest is best, I always think. Then we can add more value. We've got teams of statisticians, health economists, methodologists, PPIE, EDI experts, so we can build you a team of advisors. Do approach only one hub. We're one service, so you would go to the landing page. There'll be a list of the hubs. Choose one, or if you don't have a preference, then one will be assigned, a hub will be assigned for you. But you can expect a good service whichever hub that you end up at. Next slide, please. Oh, that's it. It's good luck. It's really good luck. Fingers crossed. If you need help, you know where to find it. We're here for you. That's us.
Thanks so much, Darren and Gareth. We'll hand over to Katie now, who will share a little bit more about her experience of applying to RfPB. I think you're on mute, Katie.
Sorry about that. Okay, I'm just going to share my slides. Here we go. So can you see, what are you seeing? Can you see the...
Yeah, we can see the full window.
Oh, hang on.
There we go.
There we go. I'm just going to try and show this in... There we go. Can you just see the slides?
That looks great, thank you.
Perfect. Okay. So thank you everyone for staying until the end to hear this talk, and thank you for inviting me to share my experiences with you today. So I hope these will be really helpful for you when considering your own application to the RfPB process. I think it's, you know, the NIHR are really supportive of nursing and midwives and AHPs, and they really do want to support us to get more clinically based research. So if you've got an idea, you know, go for it, and hopefully this will give you some confidence that you can achieve it. So I'm going to talk through my application a little bit, highlighting along the way the things that help to support its success, and hopefully help you to think about how this might apply to your ideas. So like I said, I'm Katie, I'm a clinical associate professor from the University of Leicester. So I thought I'd start with a little bit just about me to give some context of my application so you can think about where you might fit in this process. So I'm a neonatal nurse. I currently hold an NIHR ICO fellowship, which is old school for ACAF. So it's the last cohort before it turned into an ACAF. So my substantive contract is with a university, and I have an honorary contract with an NHS trust. So I know there was a question in the chat about that, and that's absolutely fine. So I was in the second year of my fellowship when I applied for the RfPB, and I started it during my third year. So you can do them at the same time. So it's been busy, but it's been doable. And I think that's probably because of the things that I'm going to go through in my application. So, and just to give you an idea of my sort of research background again, so you can think about where you fit in this process. So this is just me and my timeline of grants that I've held. So in yellow were the ones where I was a co-applicant, and green are the ones where I was the PI. So you can see I've had sort of smaller grants along the way, and had more experience with then leading those grants. The fellowship was my first experience of getting, obviously, a fellowship of a large amount of money, but then the RfPB was my first large grant as a PI. So just like I say, if you're thinking about yourself and where you fit in your experience, this is kind of how mine looks and how that's helped me to get to this point. So like I said, so when I saw the call, I kind of went straight to the staff and I wanted to discuss the team, the things that they felt were important in clinical practice at the time. My role, like I say, spans between the university and the trust. So I'm very fortunate to be able to have that link between both. And I've always been of the belief that any kind of research that we do should be undertaken in the collaboration with those who provide care on a daily basis, because it ensures it's clinically relevant and it can make a difference, you know, in my area to infants, patients, and to the parents and the families. So it was literally in the coffee room one day, and we were talking about the fact that there's this pot of funding available. And I asked the question, so if as a nursing team we could change one thing, what would it be? And it sparked off lots of different conversations. But the thing that we kept coming back to for us was around this concept of bathing babies. How often did we do it? How do you do it? Do you swaddle bath? Do we top to tail? Do we do full immersion baths for different gestations? And if we don't do it, why don't we do it? So this then got us thinking about the outcomes of doing baby baths, and was the fact that we weren't necessarily bathing babies as often linked to what we felt was a perceived rising rate of skin colonisation on the unit. So could the two be linked? And also, how well were we preparing parents to feel ready to take their baby home? If we're not supporting them with an essential part of, you know, parenting techniques, because it's hard enough to bath a newborn baby as it is, but a newborn baby who is also preterm and who's also really unwell can be quite overwhelming. So this is where we really started to build up this idea of, is there something here we can look at that's to do with baby bathing, which is a very nursing-led intervention. So first thing that I did was go and look at current practice around the country. What's the current evidence underpinning this practice? Was there something that there was a need for research? Was there a gap? And how, if there was, how could we fill it? And it turns out there's a huge gap because there's absolutely no evidence to support bathing babies in the neonatal unit. So We also, I was very conscious that the study had to be ambitious, but it had to be achievable. And it was something that had to make a difference to the nursing care of babies and families on the neonatal unit. So it's worth considering in your application, what does that look like in your area? What would it change at a local level and potentially in the future at a national level and more longer term? And what would the impact of your research be for patients and their families and for staff? We also had to make sure that this was something which parents felt was really important. So it's getting that PPI engagement right from the very beginning. And the first thing that we did when we were talking about this was I went around the neonatal unit and I spoke to a number of families about their experiences of bathing their baby, which in itself was really telling, because all the parents that I spoke to asked if actually, is that something they're allowed to do? Are they allowed to bath their baby? Which in itself told us was something that we really needed to look into this a little bit more, because parents shouldn't need to have permission to be a parent on the neonatal unit. So we explored the study idea with them, and the parents were really supportive. And we built up a group of parents whose babies had recently been discharged from the unit, and an adult who themselves had been born preterm, who came together as our PPI group to help us to shape the study. And again, for your study, it's worth considering who are those PPI members, what experience would be helpful for you in shaping your grant application. It's difficult without having the funds to actually do that before you've actually got the grant. But what we have found is that people, if they're engaged in the idea and they believe in the idea, they're very keen to come together in any way that they can to really support it, knowing that even there may be a chance that it might not get funded, but knowing that actually it could, and they could help to make a difference. And indeed, one of the comments that we had between stage 1 and stage 2 was that we needed more PPI members. So we had 4, but we increased it between stage 1 and stage 2 based on the feedback that we'd got. So alongside the parents, and again, this comes back to things that have already been said, we really needed an experienced team who could help to support the implementation of the study. So my expertise is in the nursing care and nursing development and nursing research. However, to make this study work, I needed to build up a team of expertise in all the other areas that would support it. So infection control, microbiology. So it's really important to think about who's needed for your study in terms of their role and the expertise that they will bring. I also reached out to our clinical trials unit for trial support around implementation and management, and statistical support. So think about who is available in your area to help you with that. It's also about you and how it will help to develop you in your career. So it's important to consider who will be your joint co-lead applicant, as the conversation has already been had previously from our other speakers, and how they will support you throughout the study and beyond. So for me, I'd worked with my lead co-applicant for a while. They were very much like a mentor to me, and I knew that they'd be able to support not only the study based on their clinical and research expertise, but also my career development, because they're an established professor of clinical nursing practice with lots of experience of mentoring. And this was something I set out very clearly in my application to the NIHR, so that you could see that the research plan would support not only clinical nursing practice, but the development of myself as a clinical academic nurse. So then it was bringing all of that expertise together and creating a structured application. There was a lot of backwards and forwards between different experts to make and the best methods of bathing, which bacteria would be measured, what swabs to use, all those kind of the very practical things. And then the practicalities of actually doing it, talking to the nursing team about how we're going to actually do these baths, because the baths at the unit where I was at, they're actually in 2 floors below the neonatal unit, and we have to ring a porter to get them up so we can do a bath. So it's thinking about how all of that is going to practically work when doing the study. And as a large team, we couldn't always meet at the same time, but we had a core group of us that met regularly, and then we met with others along the way to ensure that everyone was able to get involved and have their voice heard. So it's thinking about how will you do your study? How would it work in practice? Ours is a feasibility study, so it is partly about that in itself, but we need to make sure that we've got the basics covered. So, for example, the team actually know how to give a bath, so we can test this as an intervention. And this is where having a strong team again helped, as we were able to explore things like staff education. So think about your area. What do you need? Who do you need? And how will it work? So just for interest, this was our actual question that we came up with at the end. And these are some clips from one of the videos that I'll just talk about shortly that we had taken for the study. So our question ended up with, does the frequency of bathing babies on a neonatal unit impact upon pathogenic skin colonization and parent preparedness for infant discharge? So now I was looking back and I'm thinking, okay, so what was helpful for us that might be helpful for you? So for us, it was extremely helpful that the study was developed as a team, as the staff have been very engaged from the start in the project and are excited to get the project going. And the expert knowledge of the team has also made sure that we've covered everything we could possibly think of to try and make the study work in practice. Our unit also has a very strong history of successfully undertaking neonatal research. So when one of the comments from the panel came back between stage 1 and stage 2 was that the study was highly ambitious. How could we be confident that we could do it? We were able to show that the team involved in the project had previously undertaken lots of different trials. We've got experience of research, PPI, dissemination, implementation. And another comment was around providing further information around our qualitative research expertise within the team. And as I said, we were easily able to show this through our varied backgrounds, which were all very complementary and together supported all of the different aspects of the study. And it's also important, to remember that it is a grant for nurses and midwives, but it doesn't mean that your study has to be purely nursing. So ours had medical consultants, microbiologists. Oh, am I still sharing? It's saying it's paused. Here we go. Occupational therapists, but it's based around a nursing intervention and it's led by nurses. And that was really helpful and important for us to make this study happen and to show to the NIHR that we had reason to be confident in that area. We also had strong support from parents and knew it was something that parents wanted to change, and we worked really closely with parent organisations, including Bliss, which is a charity for parents with babies who are born preterm, and EI Smart, who works with parents to help support infants with developmental care. And the input of those organisations was really helped us to develop a family-friendly study with a really strong scientific background, which was doable in practice. So looking back, the things I'm really pleased that we did were to cost in everything we possibly could. So including support staff education during the trial. We worked closely with a hospital videography team. I'm hoping that the sound won't come on, but just to give you an idea. Oh, no.
Bathing a preterm baby.
Okay. So I'll just leave that there for a minute. So we worked with the hospital videography team who came onto the unit and they filmed parents bathing their twins, which was a lovely moment, as it was actually one of the twins' very first baths. And the fact that the parents let us film it for the study, I think really shows how supportive parents are of the study. So it's thinking about everything that you could possibly need to make your grant work. And we considered this at stage 1. So that if we were called through to stage 2, we were ready to go with any costings or any comments or feedback, as it's not a particularly long time between stage 1 and stage 2. So the turnaround is quite quick. So just having everything in your head of what you need, how it's going to work, even before you go into stage 1 is very, very helpful. Again, another thing that was really helpful for us is having all of those experts involved. So the microbiologists, for example, have been amazing at working with us to understand more around, skin colonization, different ways that we can capture this and explore this. So thinking about your team, who can really help support you, as that's integral to the application. Another thing is that we were ambitious, but we were focused and we kept it simple. We wanted to test bathing and its effect on skin colonization, and we kept to the basics of how to make it work without trying to make it overly complicated. We stayed on one neonatal unit. We didn't try to make it multi-site, and we started early. So we had plenty of time to consider and develop the application, get lots of input and feedback. And as Kevin said, the lay summary really is so important, and we had to rework ours numerous times to make sure it made sense. And again, it was one of the comments we had between stage 1 and stage 2 was to improve our lay summary. The thing I would definitely do differently, and this is probably, if you're successful, I would start ethics so much earlier. So I would have ethics started and ready to go as soon as you've finished stage 2 and you've put that in, I would have started my IRAS forms and my ethical application, because it's been very challenging to get it through ethics, not because of the content, but because of the volume of studies going through our pre-approval process within the trust before it then goes to the NHS rec. So it would take months off your study if you were able to plan accordingly. So that's the one thing I would do differently if I were to do this again. So just a little bit about where we are now, just to finish up. So we're just about to start recruiting. Like I say, we've costed in the training video, which is great. We're going to use it for the whole unit, not just for the study, and also for other units if they're interested. And we're now starting to think about, if the feasibility trial shows that it's feasible, and planning for that future potential RCT, and looking at different aspects of batting babies on the unit and what that means sort of from a more cultural perspective. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Katie. Yeah, it was really great to have you join us. So I'll just pass over to my colleague Catherine in a minute for some questions. Just wanted to highlight, if you've got anything, especially for Katie, Darren and Gareth while they're joining us today, please do pop them in there. If there's any program specific ones that we don't get time to answer now, we will answer those offline as well. So over to you, Catherine. Thank you.
Hiya, thank you. All your talks were fantastic. So I can see quite a few questions coming in on the Q&A now. More poised at kind of RSS and Katie Gallagher. One question, probably more for the RSS, was asked about the time commitment that is normal for an application. Would 2 days a week be realistic?
I'll take that one. Yes, I think so. I think that's about what you would expect from a PI. 20%. The mentor would generally be more like 10%. But yeah, no, that sounds perfect almost.
Thank you. Sorry, for you again, maybe, or your colleague. There are a couple of questions surrounding whether, I know you've kind of answered this in the Q&A, but I thought maybe you could elaborate a bit more, but whether you can get in touch with previous applicants for maybe collaborations or mentors. I know you've given a helpful link on there, so people can go to that, but if you had anything more to kind of elaborate on this.
I can jump in for that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we always encourage people to assume people will be friendlier than you think they will be. I know it's a big first step to cold email someone that you've never got in touch with before to ask for their support and advice. Most people that ever offer that are really, really supportive of trying to bring early career researchers through. I used to work in the NIHR fellowships team, and the advice that we would offer people there is just to risk it and to not be worried about someone's reputation. Everyone is generally quite nice, and I think one of the things that we also try and emphasize is try and think about who the best person to support you would be. It doesn't have to be the biggest name in the field. It doesn't have to be someone with the most publications. It doesn't have to be someone at your institution that you currently know and work with. I think I would encourage you to really think about the sort of person that you want to be alongside you as a mentor for the entire program that you'll be doing at RfPB. You need to have a really strong relationship with them. They need to bring probably a complementary skill set or management style to yourself. So really think about how those interactions will go. And I do think it's incredibly important to make sure that the support is legitimate, that they're going to be there for you when it gets tough, and they're going to be there for you as a sounding board. Research delivery is really challenging. It might be part of your whole role. So having someone who's truly on board and alongside you and offers that true mentorship, I think, is really important. RSS has got resources on potential templates around how you might want to draft that initial email to reach out to a supervisor or mentor. I will see if I can send that to our RfPB team after the call and make it available to you. We're still waiting on a national website to be available. So in future, I can signpost you to a link where you'll be able to get that. But for the moment, I'll be able to offer you a template resource just to give you a bit of insight into what you might want to put in that first contact email.
One other thing on that, if you're looking for someone, there's a website. If you Google NIHR funded awards, you can go to the website. You will get a searchable database of all the funded awards, and then you could look at for RfPBs, for instance. You can search by that. You could search by keywords and then you would get the names of people that have been funded, and you could contact them in that way, find them on the on the internet.
Thank you. And now a question for Katie. So following more from your experience of the application process and writing it, they ask, how did you go about to get, skip now, to get PPI involvement for your RfPB application?
So we had that initial kind of engagement, like I say, where we went around the unit and actually just talked to families about it, just to test the water and see if it was something that they thought would be useful and helpful. And then after that, because we didn't want to recruit families as part of the PPI group who were still on the unit. We had a lot of families whose babies had already been discharged from the unit, who had expressed an interest in getting involved in research. So we contacted a few of those families. And we also used our parent representative organisations. So places for us, Bliss, they have a huge amount of families that would like to get involved in research. So we sent them an email and said, we're putting this project together. They shared it with their PPI group members or those who are interested in being PPI group members. And we had families come forward from that as well. So it's thinking about perhaps who's in your clinical practice that you could potentially talk to and work with, but who are the organisations that support those families and how can they help you to have access to families who might be interested in getting involved in research. So I think there's different ways that you can go about it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. I'm sure everyone found that very informative. So many questions have been asked, and actually some have been answered about the host organisation and the lead being employed by higher education, so in a university, and what needs to happen. And this has been answered, and I just wanted to highlight that it's fine to ask obviously we need an NHS organisation to be the host for the award and to provide you with that honorary contract. And if you wanted to kind of know more about that, just look at the answered section on the Q&A. I'm going to see if there's any more for Katie. So just off the back of that, the RSS question just then about reaching out to previous applicants, did you look at doing that when you were applying for your application?
Do you know, I didn't, and it's a really good point. And I think it's something that I would definitely do if I were in that space again. And also if anyone would like to reach out to me, because, you know, part of it is also about helping to develop others moving forward. And I'd be more than happy to talk to others about their applications if people were interested. So, because it's a really good idea.
Thank
but I did do that with my fellowship, and it was very, very helpful.
Following off the back of that, do you have any kind of top tips for those applying in the specific call that you thought people should highlight, or what you found maybe brought the edge to your application?
I think probably just kind of reiterating the things which we've said around start early, get prepared and get the right team, because it's just being able to show that your idea is possible in practice, and research isn't something that you do on your own. It's having the right people around you to help you, to support you to do it. And I don't think the NIHR are looking for, you know, please correct me if I'm wrong, just but one person to be able to do something. It's also about that leadership of research. It's about how you can lead a program, how you can implement the research, and that's helping, you know, you personally and professionally, and it's also about helping to enhance the profile of nursing research in clinical practice. So like I say, I think the planning, the preparation, and the leadership of the team to help you to do it.
Thank you so much for that. So there's been maybe a couple of questions alluding to the same thing here, but I'm kind of just going to paraphrase them. But to do with a co-applicant or a joint lead, what would you find kind of as an acceptable capacity to be put down on the application? Obviously, here we're looking at kind of supporting ECRs. Maybe if you had any advice on what they could put, or what would be a no-no in this case, that would be great. Maybe RSS, Darren and his colleague.
Cool. I can jump in on that.
Gareth, sorry.
for a little bit of advice. I'd be interested to hear what RfPB think as well about like minimum thresholds and things like that. But I think for me, we always advise to make it meaningful and obvious what that particular person is going to provide and why they've been costed at that amount of time. So I think it's okay to have variance in the amount of FTE that someone is committed to you, but I think it's really important to explain and justify why that FTE has been chosen and exactly what support they're going to provide in that amount of time. So if it is a low amount, like 3 to 5% or something like that, exactly how is that going to help you deliver your research project, and how is that going to be represented in terms of meetings, in terms of one-to-one support, in terms of other things that they might be delivering on the project if it's particular expertise, and if it's higher, why is it higher and what more are they responsible for? I think there can be a whole range of different answers to that question, but the important thing is probably the justification and the legitimacy of that costed time and what exactly it'll be responsible for would be my advice.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can just thank Gareth. Just from the program perspective, I agree with that. It's important to have a clear justification. But we also hear at the committee meetings that sometimes some of the assessors are concerned that there isn't enough support provided if it is low at 3%. Is that going to be meaningful? So that needs to be clearly justified, just like you said, Gareth.
Thank you. There's quite a more specific question here, probably aimed at RSS, but someone's asked, they've got an MSc Advanced Clinical Practice working, but no prior direct research involvement or fellowship funding. Would this be disadvantaged during kind of the application process?
We'll try and answer that again. I'd be interested in program team's thoughts. I would say no, because I always think you're only up in competition with yourself in terms of justifying exactly where you're at on the journey and how your background relates to what it is that you're trying to achieve with the money. So I don't think it'd be a disadvantage so long as you're spelling out exactly where you're coming in on the pathway and how it is that you've got to where you are. Especially as an ECR, I think people are from a range of different backgrounds, and I think for something like this particular call that's targeted at nurses and midwives who can be at completely different sort of research career stages but be a very experienced clinician, my personal view would be that I don't think a particular like sort of pathway that you're on would be thought of as a disadvantage in any way.
No, I agree with you, Gareth, that we're just very open to all different kinds of sort of research careers or journey, whatever you have done, and some have not done a PhD, like we said previously, or any, they're all different kinds of backgrounds we see in the successful candidates. There's just not one type of a journey that is successful.
Okay. So does anybody else have any kind of questions that they want to put in the Q&A? If not, then we'll wrap it up there maybe. And if we haven't had a chance to answer everyone's questions, we'll message you off the back of this because we have your questions there. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'd just like to say a really big thank you to everyone for joining us today, and also especially to Katie, Darren, and Gareth. It was really great to have you with us.
Yes,
goodbye,
thank you
everyone.
so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone, good luck. Get in touch if you need us. See you later.